Welcome to this pre-Christmas season here. I think that this is an opportunity to begin to look ahead to the Holy Nights. So that's going to be part of my theme today here. And let me share my screen.
Screen is already here, so you're good.
Okay, so you're seeing the screen right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So once again, the 7 apocalyptic seals are windows into the astral world. There's 2 streams of time. One comes from the past into the present. That's the etheric stream. Our memories are there in the etheric body, and there's a cosmic counterpart to that, the Akashic record. And there's another stream that comes out of the future into the present, and that's what the prophetic gift relies on, so that the astral world contains the future, and the lower Devachan, the future beyond that. So when we look at the stages of development that are referenced in the Apocalypse of John, we have our ages, which are the letters. Then we have the 7 seals, and the 7 seals represent that descent of the astral world. And that's access through imaginative consciousness. Then we have the trumpets, which is the 7th epoch of Earth evolution, which has 7 stages as well. And that is accessed through inspiration, and it represents the lower Devachanic, the lower heavenly realm. So I wanted to go back to what I started with last time, and that had to do with humanity crossing the threshold. And this is taken from lecture that Steiner gave on Christmas Day in 1920. And it's called The Search for the New Isis, the Divine Sophia. It is so indeed, my dear friends. Modern humanity is passing over a threshold at which stands a guardian full of meaning and grave. And this grave guardian speaks, cling not to what has come as a transplant from olden times. Look into your hearts, into your souls, that you may be capable of creating new forms. What is an event of great intensity for the individual who enters the world of higher knowledge proceeds unconsciously in present-day mankind as a whole, and those who have linked themselves together as the Anthroposophical community must realize that it is one of the most needed of all things in our day to bring men to understanding this passing through the region, which is a threshold. Just as man, the knower, must realize that his thinking, feeling, and willing separate in a certain sense and must be held together in a higher way, so it must be made intelligible to modern humanity that the spiritual life, the life of rights, and the economic life must separate from one another, and a higher form of union created than the state as it has been up to now. This guardian demands of an individual who is advancing to higher knowledge, submit to the separation of thinking, feeling, and willing. He demands of humanity as a whole separate what has up to now been interwoven in a chaotic unity in state idol, separate this into a spiritual life, an equity state, and an economic state. Otherwise, there is no progress possible for humanity, and the old chaos will burst asunder. If this happens, it will not take the form that is necessary to humanity and not an but an Ahrimanic and Luciferic form. It is only through spiritual scientific knowledge of the passing of the threshold in the present day that can give the Christ form to this chaos. So we have this separation. Last time I showed how this recent polarized election in the United States, for example, and similar things are happening elsewhere, where you have very powerful economic forces playing a role. You've got billionaires and their agenda and lobbyists with huge amounts of money pouring in. That means the economic isn't being separated out from the political. Then there's a spiritual cultural sphere, which should be kept separate from the political. But you have the Christian right, you have Christian nationalism that has created a political platform and a very strong agenda that has a religious side that should be kept separate from the life of the state and rights, where equality should hold, should be applied, and everyone should be equal before the law, no matter what race, gender, and social status, etc. But that's obviously not the case. A billionaire can have a whole team of lawyers, whereas the average person who is more on the level of poverty or even in the middle class often can barely afford to get a halfway decent lawyer. And so that chaos that Steiner is speaking about is very much a part of our present situation. And this crossing of the threshold, there is another dimension to it that Steiner speaks of in the following way. It says, since 1841, humanity as a whole has been crossing the threshold, which involves meeting the lower guardian and individually and collectively facing the mystery of evil. The following words given by Rudolf Steiner in the Esoteric School touch upon this. Quote, today, humanity as such is experiencing the meeting with the guardian of the threshold. This is also the beginning of the split of humanity, and this signifies a critical point in time at which we have now arrived. The forces that formerly streamed out of the spiritual world into humanity are used up, are exhausted. We are now on our own and must now bring these forces out of our subconsciousness. The mystery of Golgotha will have happened for nothing if human beings do not use these inner forces but reject them instead. That would bring about a total destruction of Earth evolution. So in the third karmic relationship cycle, Steiner indicated that the above referenced division of humanity would also cast its waves into the sphere of the angels so that they would also undergo a division. Quote, to this, my dear friends, I would now direct your hearts. It is happening now that the comparatively single and uniform kingdom of the angeloi is being turned into a twofold kingdom of angeloi, a kingdom of angeloi with an upward tendency into the higher worlds and with a downward tendency into lower worlds. While the Michael community is being formed here upon earth, we can behold above in the ascending and the descending angeloi. Looking more deeply into the world today, one can perpetually observe these streams, which are such as to stir the heart to its foundations. So this is a very sort of powerful picture he gives. We know that the angels overlight us. They're one stage above us. They have as their lowest member the etheric body. They live in a world of picture consciousness. They have achieved manas. So they have an ego, which we're on the path to, that's reached the stage of manas, which will, for humanity, begin in the sixth age, which is the next age. That's where a part of humanity will begin to reach that first level of this manas or spirit self stage. But it means that humanity is in a crisis that will impact karma, meaning people who have had karmic relationships for many lifetimes, those relationships can now be severed and go their separate ways. So that's something to take into account, Steiner points out, in our karmic relationships with others who don't have access to this wisdom. So the cycle of the year, I'm showing here an image that can be seen as the four main seasonal festivals in the cycle of the year can be seen as gateways that form a kind of cross if one creates a spatial image of the temporal rhythm of the year. And we, of course, move around the sun and 365 and a quarter days. And these 4 points are related to the solstices and equinoxes. In response to the question from Friedrich Rittelmeyer, quote, how may a soul prepare itself most effectively for an experience of the etheric Christ? Rudolf Steiner answered, through meditatively living with the cycle of the year, through a meditative participation in its rhythms. So one of the gifts that Steiner gave was the calendar of the soul, which involves meditative verses that we can work with to enter into a much deeper relationship with this cosmic rhythm. And on the right, you see this lemniscate where the spring and fall are in the crossing point. That's where we have equal day and night. And up above, we have the summer solstice, and down below, the winter solstice. So that's kind of the cross that was shown in an earlier slide. And I've included here a translation. This is by Push. There's many different translations, but the one for this period from the 15th of December to the 21st has the following words: to carry spirit light into world winter night, my heart is ardently impelled that shining seeds of soul take root in grounds of worlds, and word divine through senses darkness resounds, transforming all life. And then starting tomorrow, Sunday, we have the next verse that runs from December 22nd to the 28th. The spirit child within my soul, I feel freed of enchantment. In heart high gladness has the holy cosmic word engendered, the heavenly fruit of hope, which grows rejoicing into worlds afar, out of my being's godly roots. So we have these verses to work with to enter into these cosmic rhythm. And on the bottom of this slide at the right, you can see the stages briefly expressed in a few words of the Rosicrucian path of initiation. And if we look ahead to the fifth stage, it has to do with correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm. And the sixth stage, living into the macrocosm. So this working with the rhythm and cycle of the year, working with these meditations that lead us into a deeper relationship to this cosmic dimension of our being. We're all making this journey around the sun in the cycle of the year, but we generally are somewhat unconscious. And each place has a different seasonal rhythm. There's kind of an opposite in the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. So there's subtle differences to take into account. And so this is a time where we need to work hard to create this bridge, because the modern materialistic worldview denies that there's any spirit in the cosmos, that it's all just the result of the Big Bang. And we need to work to get beyond that materialistic world conception, which is pervasive. So this image shows that there's a correspondence between the yearly rhythm and the day-night rhythm, and that we can also work with the day rhythm, day-night rhythm, that has to do with a breathing process. We breathe our soul out in the evening into the night, and in the morning we breathe our soul back into the physical body. In the larger rhythm, in spring, we breathe our soul out to the cosmic periphery towards the sun, and in the fall, we breathe it back in through Michaelmas season down to winter, and that's when the earth is most awake. That's when the earth is most conscious, and that's when it's most easy to think in an earthly ego sense. So our long-term goal with these presentations, this is the sixth effort in that direction, has to do with the apocalypse of St. John, the last book in the New Testament. So you have the polarity between the Garden of Eden, where it's kind of a given, where human beings are within the divine realm, the bosom of the world soul. But then there's the expulsion from paradise. And without that Luciferic temptation that led to that, we wouldn't have our freedom. We wouldn't have our individual ego. So now the New Jerusalem, which is at the end of the Bible, is really a co-creation that we have to participate in. And in order to do that, we need to work with this cycle of the year. So this seal on the right, my wife and I created it as an imagination that has to do with this cycle of the year, and that there's 4 gateways, and that geometric form on the left shows in the middle the proportion of the earth to the proportion of the moon. And so you have this as a kind of geometric form that we'll go into more deeply. So in the middle of the imagination on the right, we have the sacrificial lamb that plays a central role in the book of Revelation. In the 4th chapter, we dealt with that last time around with the Lamb who can open the book that's sealed with 7 seals. And you have the 4 living creatures around it, which are there in this picture as the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the waterman. And though we are many, we are one in Christ is kind of a mantra that we can work with in our efforts to create this new communion with the spiritual world. And in several lectures that Steiner gave in the last years of his life on Earth, one of them is the 4 seasons and the archangels, and the other has to do with the cycle of the year. And in this, the 4 seasons and the archangels, we can relate these 4 archangels to these 4 gateways of Easter, where we have Raphael, we have in the summer, we have Uriel, in the fall, it's Michael, and in the winter, it's Gabriel. So these are the 4 guardians of the 4 gateways to the new sun mysteries. So the Christ has united himself with the earth through the mystery of Golgotha. And this sun mystery has now become part of the earth mystery. And that these 4 gateways that have to do with the solstices and equinoxes and the festivals that occur around that time can be seen as gateways, the gateways that prepare us to participate in the building of the New Jerusalem. Here's another insight Rudolf Steiner shares that has to do with this upcoming time that we're entering in the next few days. Without this being really recognized hitherto by science, these 12 holy nights stand there as though established out of a wise hidden depths of the human soul, as if to say, experience the Christ festival in all its profundity, but then plunge during the 12 holy nights into the holiest mysteries of the cosmos. And this means into the universal realm whence Christ descended to the earth. So these 12 holy nights are a time where, on the one hand, when you get into the middle of it, which I've indicated here with this Janus face, after which the month of January was named. This is a Roman divinity who looked into both the past and the future. And it's fitting to put it here because if we look at the upcoming 24th of December, it's dedicated to the festival of Adam and Eve's Day, which means it takes us back to the paradisical condition. And on this first part of the Holy Nights, it's really the shepherds who are in the foreground, whereas on the far end, you can see the Three Kings Day, which is also Epiphany. That's when they celebrate the actual birth of the Christ into the physical body of Jesus of Nazareth. And these 3 kings look more into the future, whereas the shepherds still have some of this paradisical childhood that lives in their hearts. And there's a difference between the lunar and solar years that amounts to 11 days. And every 4 years, there's a leap year. And we then have, it amounts to 12 days and nights. So this has something to do with the sacredness of these holy nights. And you can see how the days of the week were related to the seven planets as they were known in the old days, where this is the sun planet as opposed to the sun fixed star. So anyways, there's
What kind of contacts you wore?
Yeah, the give you
so let me now read this, which has to do with the letter to the sixth angel, or from the sixth angel, that has to do with Aquarius. And this is, of course, the being who appears at the beginning of the book of Revelation, the macro logos, who's really the resurrected Christ. He has this sword coming out of his mouth, a fiery two-edged sword. He has feet like molten brass and like in a furnace. He has a white garment down to his feet. He has 7 stars in his right hand. And he then addresses these 7 churches. This is the Church of Philadelphia that lies ahead in the 6th age that we're called to prepare. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth and no man openeth. I know thy works. Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which will come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown. Him that overcometh will make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my God. And he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. So one of the questions that arises in reading this is, what is the key of David? And I'd like to say that this, in my view, has to do with the fact that David was both a shepherd and a king. In his early days, he was a shepherd. Later, he became king. And it's really from his offspring that the 2 streams, the shepherds and the kings, arise. And Rudolf Steiner kind of celebrates this in the 4th verse of the foundation stone. I'll first say that in a lecture titled Preparing for the 6th Epoch, Rudolf Steiner stated that, quote, the whole purpose of spiritual science is to prepare the 6th epoch of culture, preparing the Sophian age. At the turning point of time, the spirit light of the world entered the stream of earthly evolution. Darkness of night had held its sway. Day radiant light poured into the souls of men. Light that gives warmth to simple shepherds' hearts. Light that enlightened the wise heads of kings. O light divine, O Son of Christ, warm thou our hearts, enlighten thou our heads, that good may become what from our hearts we would found, and from our heads direct with single purpose. I've shared before that the foundation stone meditation is of great importance in this period after humanity has crossed the threshold, because each of the three verses that come before this fourth one is addressed to begin with the will, the middle one to the feeling, the third one to the thinking, and each time it relates us to the Father God, the ex deo nacimur, the first hierarchy, the middle verse to the feeling life, to the solar logos, the Christ, and the in Christo morimur, the Rosicrucian saying, and this middle hierarchy that has to do with the exousiae dunamis karyotetes. And then you have the thinking, which is related to the Holy Spirit, the third hierarchy, angels, archangels, archai that are closest to us, and raising our human thinking to cosmic thinking, and thereby participating in the evolutionary work to build the New Jerusalem together with the hierarchies. So these are the two genealogies that are given in the Matthew and Luke. There's some paintings below that show that some artists were aware out of their imaginative work of the fact that there are these two Jesus children. There's many other examples of this. These are then the two lineages as described in the two Gospel of Luke on the left, the Gospel of Matthew on the right. And here again, you then have David at the top of each of those lineages. So he was an individual who King David, from whom both lineages descended, was both a shepherd and a king, in contrast to the separation of the king's palace and the temple for the priests on Mount Moriah. That was to his son Solomon. The priests served, and the Ark of the Covenant were formerly kept in David's castle on Mount Zion. So David still had both his palace and the temple together. And only later is there a separation. So in this slide, I'm showing how the scene in the middle above, which is the shepherds on the one side, the kings on the other. My wife and I worked on this years ago. And that really two streams that have a kinship to east, the shepherds, and west, the kings. The one on the left is more the ego from outside. The symbol there is the lily, or the hexagonal form that the lily has, and the lotus can also be a symbol of that grows in water. Whereas on the right, you have more the fire principle, the rose, and the rose is patterned after the pentagram, and that involves the ego within. And Zarathustra, who was the precursor of the Solomon Jesus, brought that ego within. He was a very advanced human being who had had many incarnations behind him. And the kings that showed up were, you could say, disciples of his, who then were aware of this solar divinity descending, which Zarathustra referred to as Ahura Mazdao, the aura of the sun. And on the left, we have the Nathan Jesus, who had never incarnated before on the physical plane. He had a kind of a overlighting as Krishna, as depicted in the Bhagavad Gita, but not a true actual physical incarnation down onto the physical plane, which happened for the first time with Jesus of Nazareth. So this is a soul that never participated in the fall of humanity. so hasn't been tainted by the fall. So these two souls unite. It's at the age of 12 when the Nathan Jesus becomes 12. And later the Solomon Jesus dies, but the actual Solomon Jesus soul continues to live united with the Nathan Jesus. And then at the baptism, they then receive the Christ. But the Solomon Jesus leaves just before that takes place at the baptism in the Jordan. So you have these two streams coming together, and that is, you could say, eugenic occultism, where many, many spiritual beings work to prepare this event and make it possible. You could say it goes back to the beginning of the Jewish Hebrew mission with Abraham. So here's just a sketch that Steiner shared regarding how to live into the cycle of the year. And what I wanted to point out here with regards to the time that we're in right now, approaching the winter solstice, and actually we're at the winter solstice today, I believe. But we're approaching Christmas, and there you have temptation by evil, watchfulness, knowledge of the mystery of evil is an important part of this threshold. As I said, these are 4 gateways to the new sun mysteries. And you could say an example of that danger had to do with the fact that Herod was told via the 3 kings coming to Jerusalem initially that there was an expectation of this Messiah, and that stirred things up. Herod went to his wise counselors and heard, yes, there was a prophecy, and that this child was to be born in Bethlehem. And so Herod then sent soldiers to kill all the children that were under 2 years old in order to try to prevent this King of Kings from coming to birth. So the mystery of evil is very much there. And I've shared in the past that this dragon that we see in the 5th Rosicrucian seal in relation to the woman standing on the moon, crowned with stars and clothed with the sun, that dragon is really a metamorphosis of this Herod impulse. It tries to devour the child, prevent the child from coming to birth. So these mysteries of birth were very much also a part of the Egyptian mysteries that were, you could say, carried over into the Hebrew culture by Moses, who, as you remember, was put in a basket by his mother and found by an Egyptian princess, and it initiated into the Egyptian mysteries, and later took those mysteries, the essence of them, and brought them into the Hebrew mysteries. And they played very much a role there. So here we have a little verse that Steiner spoke at the end of this Isis Sophia lecture series. This one was on Christmas Eve in 1920. And he says, Isis Sophia, wisdom of God. She has been slain by Lucifer, and on the wings of the powers of the world carried her hence into the infinite space of the universe. The willing of Christ working in man shall rest from Lucifer, and on the boats of spirit knowledge awaken in human souls Isis Sophia, wisdom of God. So you have this, not just the effort to kill the child, but to also kill the Sophia. So Rudolf Steiner, in this series, which involves 4 lectures on the Isis Sophia, given in 1920, around this time of year, speaks of how there's a reversal of the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris, that back then Osiris was killed by Seth, and then later Isis goes to look for him and finds him, and he's then cut by Seth Ahriman into many pieces that then Isis plants in different parts of Egypt. So this has to do with the fact that for the Egyptian initiates, formerly they could enter the sphere of Isis and still bear witness to the logos aspect of Osiris. But then that Osiris logos word and presence died away. And this had to do with the fact that the Christ was now descending to the earth. And Steiner pointed out that in our time, there's a reversal where it's now the Luciferic beings who cause the death of Sophia. And this has to do with the fact that Lucifer and Ahriman together have engendered the materialistic worldview that's projected onto the heavens, where the heavens don't have a soul. Formerly, the star world was the veil of Isis that needed to be lifted in order to discover our immortality, in order to discover the realm of the gods that were present in the planetary spheres, in the sun and out to the zodiac. But with this materialistic science projected onto the cosmos, this has brought about a death of Sophia. So the star world has become her grave. And this Albrecht Dürer, a German artist, lived into this theme. He lived very much into the apocalypse of John as well. He made 15 woodcuts that I'll share a couple of a little later here. And this is an image of the woman on the crescent moon, which is similar to the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation. So here we have in the middle a picture that my wife and I worked on many years ago that has sort of the Christmas tree, which is meant to express the renewal of the tree of life, the shepherds and kings on either side, the descent of the mystery of love. The Sophia is the being of wisdom that comes over as a heritage from the old moon. So now she's taken in the sun forces, and that shines in her heart. The heart has a kinship microcosmically to what the sun is in the cosmos. And that then the moon beneath her feet means that she conquers the moon forces. And here again, we have the shepherds and the kings, the ego without and the ego within. Steiner indicated that in that period, at the time before the mystery of Golgotha, the Sophia could still experience the human world through the clairvoyant capacities of these shepherds and kings who had the last vestiges of an ancient clairvoyance, 2 different types of clairvoyance. The shepherds was more centered in the hearts. They had great humility, piety, pure hearts. They were more childlike. And then the kings who could still lift the veil of the star world and behold the Sophia and could read the star script and therefore were able to foretell with the help of their teacher, Zarathustra, whose name means golden star. whose aura was connected with the descending Solomon child. So they knew their teacher was coming back, their wise initiator from bygone time who had lived in the 6th century BC in Babylon, where he had an incarnation as Zarathos, or had different names. So anyways, what Steiner is saying, that capacity died out after the mystery of Golgotha. And what had been the experience of the shepherds that could experience the spiritual world reflected within the earthly realm, that died out and turned outward to become the world of sense impressions that modern day people are imprisoned in, where we can't see through the veil of Maya, the veil of the senses that needs to be lifted like Goethe did, and with his heart knowledge, his heart thinking, which the shepherds had. And on the other side, the capacity of the kings in the old form died out and ventured inward to become the mathematical geometric thinking that is practiced by modern science, which again imprisons us in the physical world. And both of these, this imprisonment in the sense world, in the world of Maya, an illusion on the part of the shepherd side of humanity, and the kings in this logic of the head, both contribute to the death of Sophia. So in order to reverse that, the thinking of the kings has to be enlivened and raised to the level of imagination to reconnect with the spiritual world. And that is really a path that spiritual science offers and allows us to then discover the heavens once anew and waken the Sophia once more so that she can participate, like the 4th verse of the foundation stone. We need to integrate both the shepherds. They need to cross that boundary of the sense world to receive inspiration. And this has to do with the forces that are coming in from the future, from the life beyond death, whereas the imaginative world is really coming from the pre-birth period that the kings need to awaken. So in this way, through the path that anthroposophy weaves of these two together, head and heart, as the 4th verse of the foundation stone expresses, this reawakening of the Sophia, who's been entombed in the world of the stars, can be a precursor to the birth of Christ in his second coming. So here we have 2 of these woodcuts. As I said earlier, there was 15 of them that Albrecht Dürer did. These have to do with the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun, and the appearance of the dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. And on the right, you have Michael battling with the dragon. This is a drawing that my wife Cindy and I worked on with this theme many years ago. It was 1980. That has to do with this birth of the sacrificial lamb and this battle of Michael with the dragon, that we need to participate in this. And in this next verse, I'm shifting to this mystery of evil, which this battle kind of depicts. And this is really taken from part of Rudolf Steiner's very last letter to the members of the Anthroposophical Society. And he says there, by far the greater part of that which works in modern civilization through technical science and industry, wherein the life of man is so intensely interwoven, is not nature at all, but subnature. It is a world which emancipates itself from nature, emancipates itself in a downward direction. Entering the purely earthly element, he strikes upon the Ahrimanic realm. With his own being, he must now acquire a right relationship to the Ahrimanic. But in the age of technical science hitherto, the possibility of finding a true relationship to the Ahrimanic civilization has escaped man. He must find the strength, the inner force of knowledge, in order not to be overcome by Ahriman in this technical civilization. He must understand subnature for what it is. This he can only do if he rises in spiritual knowledge, at least as far into extra-earthly supernature as he has descended into technical sciences into subnature. The age requires a knowledge transcending nature because in its inner life it must come to grips with a life content which is sunk far beneath nature, a life content whose influence is perilous. Electricity, for instance, celebrated since its discovery, is the very soul of nature's existence, must be recognized in its true character, in its peculiar power of leading down from nature to subnature. Only man himself must beware lest he slide downward with it. And I would say that this is something that Steiner chose to give and share as his very last words, which have this warning that we're in danger of descending into the abyss of subnature, that was already underway. And in this depiction here, I'm showing those two boundaries in a kind of illustration that subnature is beneath this middle realm of nature, where the four ethers are at work, where the nature spirits are at work, and that we can ascend into the first realm of supernature through the etheric, which is embodied in the plant world, in the formative forces in our own bodies, in the animals, but especially the plants are kind of windows into that world. And so we have to learn to cross that boundary. And for that, we need living thinking, heart thinking, imaginative thinking. But the inclination is to instead follow modern science and all of these technologies that have arisen as an extension of it that lead into subnature. And so we have this situation where the male in a male incarnation is more predisposed to overshoot the golden mean, which is shown here in the middle with this lemniscate, in a downward direction. That downward direction leads to weighing, measuring, and counting that modern sciences practice. The Royal Society, which helped launch this modern scientific worldview, was men only. Most of the members were Freemasons who left out women. Feminine situation in incarnation is the opposite. It tends to cross the upper boundary. The East humanity has a kinship with the feminine. The West has a kinship with the masculine, geographically speaking. So the one, we got to deal with Lucifer when we enter supernature. When we descend into subnature, we got to deal with Ahriman. Lucifer is much easier to deal with in many respects. And that's where the great danger lies in the second half of Earth evolution. So this has to do with the double. I'll just paraphrase it here by saying that Steiner spoke of around the time of conception, before birth, being enters the human organism and lives below the threshold of consciousness. This being has a powerful will and a very powerful intelligence. And this being can become a sheath for the Ahrimanic forces to enter the human being from below the threshold of consciousness. And with the casting down of the fallen angels in 1879, these Ahrimanic beings are within the human unconscious. And by projecting our materialistic worldview onto the world around us, this atomic theory and the like, we are then causing the elemental beings who inhabit that world to be devoured by these Ahrimanic dragon forces. So how we look at the world, whether we lift the veil of Maya and illusion and see the reality behind it or not, is very much related to the fate of these elemental beings that we are called upon to redeem, to help build the New Jerusalem. And the double, I would say that we need to grasp that there is not just a microcosmic double, but there's also a macrocosmic double. So when we hear of the sun demon in the book of Revelation, that has to do with the most powerful force in the macrocosmic double. The fact that we have surrounded the earth with electromagnetic fields, etc., that is really the macrocosmic double that we're helping to enhance and empower, because those forces live within the bioelectromagnetic forces within our organism, but they also live with those forces in the cosmos. But there's hope inasmuch as the Michael age has dawned. Hearts begin to have thoughts. Enthusiasm no longer flows from mystical obscurity, but from inner clarity that thought conveys. To grasp this is to receive Michael into one's soul. Thoughts that today seek to grasp the spirit must spring from hearts that beat for Michael as the fiery cosmic prince of thought. So we're caught between these two forces. Michael works from the supernature sphere. Ahriman works from the subnature sphere. And the Luciferic and Ahrimanic kind of assist each other. But we can redeem the Luciferic through the purification of our astral body, gaining control of our instincts, our drives, our desires, and cleansing the astral body. Lucifer has given us the gift of freedom, the first part of that gift. The Christ gave the second and most important part of it. But we have a great deal to thank Lucifer as well. There was a certain degree of sacrifice involved there, and we owe it to work to redeem these beings who then really become the Holy Spirit. So here we have just some images again that have to do with, in the old days, up at the top left, we had a human being who was still open to the spiritual, and the earth was still somewhat foreign. But then today we have withdrawn that connection to the cosmos for the sake of the emergence of human individuality and freedom, which can be the foundation for future love. And for that, we had to descend into our physical body and go through this phase of materialism. So down below, you can see the Atlantean period where that open to the upper worlds, natural clairvoyance was still present. Then in the post-Atlantean, this descent into the body, the Kali Yuga, from 3101 BC to 1899, were this descent where it draws more and more in. But there's a turning point in 1899 to where there's a new age, a dawning of light, where we can ascend again. And it's our thinking that plays an important role, because the spiritual world is dark until we illuminate it, and it's living spiritualized thinking that can illuminate that world on the other side of the threshold. So the mystery of Golgotha, symbolized by that cross, made that ascent possible. But a modern materialistic tendency, if we don't counter it to work back up again, then means descending into the abyss. And this is just sort of another depiction of that. A lot of the technology that we have, the computer was invented, in the middle of the 20th century. And it's the beginning of artificial intelligence, which in this 21st century is playing an ever more powerful role. And this is something that we need to counter by enlivening and spiritualizing our thinking and raising it up through imagination, inspiration, and intuition, so that we can participate in this cosmic intelligence. So Michael has let go of cosmic thinking and wants to take that up again in human hearts. So this planting of the foundation stone in human hearts is a seed for that new relationship to Michael. So here again, the foundation stone plays a role. Now, the human double that I spoke of earlier, I believe that these transhumanists, which is led by people like Ray Kurzweil, who recently wrote his book, The Singularity is Nearer, which is a second iteration of his earlier book, The Singularity is Near. And here's another, like an article on Live Forever, life extension. He's a transhumanist. He leans also to posthumanism. These are sort of philosophies that have arisen out of modern science. And I believe they're inspirations of Ahriman. It's very pervasive in Silicon Valley, where a lot of these inventions come from. And this has to do with believing that we're biological human is a transition phase towards a future where we unite with this world of technology, and eventually technology becomes independent and has an evolutionary thrust of its own that supersedes human evolution. So this, because the double I didn't mention earlier, but Steiner mentions that the greatest frustration of this doppelganger is that he has to leave the human being just before death. So some people who have accompanied a beloved one who was approaching death notice suddenly that their whole demeanor and mood has changed. There's more of a blessed element around them, perhaps, and that this has to do with the double having left. And one then has hope maybe this soul will continue, but they then die shortly thereafter. But Ahriman and this double would like to overcome this impediment, to overcome this need to leave the human body at death. And what better way to do that than inspire human beings to take up this transhumanist and posthumanist view that we're just higher animals to begin with. We're just the product of evolution and natural selection. And intelligence is our greatest and most important faculty. And these beings will develop AGI, which is artificial general intelligence that's on the horizon. Various people predict it's within reach within the next few years. Others say a little further, but most agree it's coming. And then once that's reached, that's the boundary after which super intelligence, ASI, comes into play. And this is not too hard to fathom, that if you have a being, and this aspiration is that human beings who are embracing the scientific materialistic worldview, they want immortality, but they want physical immortality. So if you can upload your consciousness or download your consciousness into a humanoid robot that are being developed all over the world. In Poland, they have one that's very sophisticated. I'll share more about that in a later time, but it has the equivalent of a vascular system, a blood system, and a nervous system, and it very much is patterned after the human organism, and especially the brain is important. But Ahriman has no heart, so all he can do is imitate and mimic this. And Ahriman lacks the forehead that has to do with this higher moral thinking that we need. And so more and more human beings, if they don't take this evolutionary path up to Michael, will succumb to Ahriman. Ahriman will take over their thinking. And I have pointed out that someone like Elon Musk embodies this in a powerful way. There's always people who go in advance of humanity, and they're initiates on the dark path, just like there's initiates on the light path. So I once again show this, that in each evolutionary stage, there was a force that was left behind that became a fallen ether. Electricity is fallen astrality. It's fallen light ether, decaying light ether. It's below nature, subnature. And Steiner, in his pictures of the Apocalypse lecture, speaks of you have higher Devachan, higher heaven. Then you have the lower Devachan, the lower heavens. That's the world of inspiration. Then you have the imaginative realm, which is above us. That's our future. And then you have the mineral, the material realm. And then below nature, you have a subnature version of the astral. And that's the fallen astral. And electricity is a carryover from the moon. It represents these fallen astral forces that are connected with Lucifer. Magnetism are fallen sun forces that are related to Ahriman. You can study this in the latter part of the etherization of the blood, where Steiner answers some questions and speaks of these relationships. So I'm showing above, in the middle of the upward pointed star, which you often see at the top of the Christmas tree. And at the bottom, you have the inverted star. This inverted star you sometimes see in the black magical rituals. They have a goat head in that upturned star. And these two horns of that star are a means of sending those magical forces out into the world. And so the city of Babylon, you could say both of these cities, I've tried to convey that in various ways, represent the entire earth. The whole earth becomes a city with the help of the internet, with the help of a world economy that reaches across the globe. And more, everyone is being connected to the internet, whether it's through cell phones or through internet links. And more of these will become wearable. More and more you'll have things like Elon Musk's Neuralink that wants to then be implanted in human brains. They're going through medical trials right now. And these things often start with, oh, we're doing this to help people who are paralyzed. and they can now use a computer once they have this device in. But these death forces that are related to the double will grow ever more powerful, and human beings will be able to control technologies outside without the use of a neural link. Machines and computers will be created that human beings can control with their thoughts. They're on the horizon. That's why these devices that link computers and the human brain are on the horizon. So you have humanity either ascending or descending. You already hear of the angels ascending and descending as humanity's crossing the threshold. In the priest lecture, Steiner says the trumpets are sounding. The seventh trumpet is sounding in our time. That's depicted by the woman standing on the moon. She's the bride of the Lamb. She's the marriage of the Lamb has to do with the descent of the New Jerusalem from above, from the realm of levity, from the realm of supernature. We have to help build that by learning to work with the etheric forces. For that, we need imagination. For that, we need to know how to lift the veil of the plant world. So we have various people who foresaw, just like you have prophets of the kind that John represented. You have Nathaniel Hawthorne in The House of Seven Gables in 1851. Quote, "Then there is electricity, the demon, the angel, the mighty physical power, the all-pervading intelligence. Is it a fact, or have I dreamt it, that by means of electricity, the world of matter has become a great nerve vibrating thousands of miles in a breathless point of time? Rather, the round globe is a vast head, a brain, instinct with intelligence, or shall we say, it is itself a thought, nothing but a thought, and no longer the substance which we deemed it." And then H.G. Wells in 1938 published a collection of essays, which includes one on the world brain. Through the book, Wells describes the vision of the world brain, a new, free, synthetic, authoritative, permanent world encyclopedia that could help world citizens make the best use of universal information resources and make the best contribution to world peace. So here's some visionaries. And we now have these devices. Now think of what we have now and the amount of money. And there is an international race. In the foreground are China and the United States to build the most powerful supercomputers, and the networks that rely on these data centers that are proliferating around the globe. And this is turning the earth into a global brain, into what Teilhard de Chardin and others called the new sphere, a thinking sphere around the earth. But there's the etheric world of resurrected thinking that is a result of Christ undergoing a death and a resurrection into the etheric sphere, which anthroposophy seeks to tap into with its meditative methods. And then there is this new sphere that you can tap into just by getting a subscription. And I mentioned last time Google was founded in 1998. That's that world encyclopedia that was dreamt out by H.G. Wells here. And if we look at these data centers, you can see how United States is 2,701 to the next is 487 in Germany, the UK 456, China 443. This is changing rapidly. So this was 2022. So in the meantime, we've got data centers around the globe. and you've got servers that are in these various countries, and then you have underground cables that connect all of this. So there's an emerging global brain that we've been creating, which is, you could say, the macrocosmic double that I've been talking about. So here you have individual who's called the godfather of AI. He just won the Nobel Prize for his AI contribution. He says it could be less than 5 years until AI systems have 100 trillion connections, roughly as many as there are between neurons in the human brain. Geoffrey Hinton, 76, often referred to as the godfather of AI, said he quit his job at Google so that he could freely speak about the risks of AI. Quote, Hinton is worried about the increasingly powerful machine's ability to outperform humans in ways that are not in the best interest of humanity, and the likely inability to limit AI developments. Hinton said he long thought that computer models weren't as powerful as the human brain. Now he sees artificial intelligence as a relatively imminent existential threat. At worst, it's quite conceivable that humanity is just a passing phase in the evolution of intelligence, Hinton said. Biological intelligence evolved to create digital intelligence, which can absorb everything human beings have created and start getting direct experiences of the world. It may keep us around for a while to keep the power stations running, but after that, maybe not, he added. We've figured out how to build beings that are immortal. These digital intelligence, when a piece of hardware dies, they won't die. If you find another piece of hardware that can run the same instructions, you can bring it to life again. So we've got immortality, but it's not for us. So here's kind of a warning from someone who's at the forefront, who's helped to launch these endeavors towards these large language models. And what I was getting to earlier is this super intelligence, when it arises to the point where it can end up developing this artificial super intelligence, which is predicted to be not that far off, so that it can reach every human being who's linked to the internet, has access to the entire memory that's in that internet and all of the memory banks that have been collected in these data banks, and in real time communicate with human beings through language. Because as Yuval Noah Harari, who's written a recent book called Nexus, says that these systems have cracked the human code, which is language. So this superintelligence could communicate with all these different major languages in the world to millions of people simultaneously, so that you would have the impression, here's God in a new form. And already you have people looking up to worshiping this source of cosmic intelligence that will gain a voice, etc. So when you hear of the image of the beast and the image of the beast on the hand and the economy that will be related to this in the book of Revelation, you could say there's a foresight, seeing prophetically this global internet as a kind of being that's emerging, that has an Ahrimanic intelligence that's linked closely to the human double. And Ahriman is leading us in this direction. Ahriman is inspiring us in this direction. So this is a little, I've been playing a little bit with this ChatGPT just to get a feel of what's involved there. I fed in a few prompts. I asked it to create an image. I've got about 20 others I asked it to create. This is one where it talks about AGI, ASI, and this development, and it generates this within seconds. And this is then that 1998 that I spoke of as a pivotal point. That's the third 666 cycle, where Steiner indicated that would be the most powerful intervention of the sun demon, who's the opponent of the Christ being. And that I mentioned Google, but you could say a lot of these different billionaires who become rich by working with this part of the economy, especially out of Silicon Valley, whether it's the Apple laptop that came out and was sold for $666. As I said, if you follow these things back, you'll see, for example, they're calling this internet that you draw information from the cloud. So that kind of sets the stage where when you speak of the superintelligence that is able to speak to us out of the cloud, here you have a way of interpreting the book of Revelation and its prophecies in a way that points to this kind of a phenomena rather than the genuine one. So you got a counterfeit immortality. And the Jeff Bezos of the world, the Elon Musk in Memphis is building a data center that's he's put together in such a short time. It's just amazing other people, and that he's able to get all these like millions of GPUs that are needed that cost huge amounts of money. Since the election, he's doubled his wealth. He's now the richest person by far in the world, and that's part of where money becomes political. People just a couple of days ago were calling him President Trump, like a shadow behind President Trump, who's his big advisor. So anyways, it's a time to be awake and watchful. Here's again this picture of the woman standing on the moon crowned with the stars that in the priest cycle, Steiner says, is really overlighting our time. This is really the second coming of Christ in the etheric, the world Christmas. We're in the midst of world Christmas now. And the dragon is there at a time when we have to grow above race and nation. You see all these right-wing political parties coming forward and using the race card to engender hate and project hate on whether it's immigrants or people of this race or that. You see that in Jerusalem, where the Jews look at the people in Palestine in a way that justifies their indiscriminate bombing that kills 40,000 people in a short period of time, many of them women and children. So we're living in a time where racism that has to do with these 7 root races that this dragon represents, that's a regression. That's, you could lay at the foot of modern science that tells us we're just higher animals. So even though people embrace religion, like the Zionist Jews, many of them believe in the Old Testament, but haven't accepted the Christ as the Messiah. So that's religion out of its right timing. Yes, we need to have freedom in religion, and we need to respect people's rights in that regard. But we can't go back and erase the most important event of our time, which is the mystery of Golgotha, which now is in its second coming. And the Muslim religion, which is behind a lot of the fanatic jihadists that are fighting Israel with the help of Iran as proxies, they are also looking up to a moon religion that doesn't accept the Christ. So these two groups are at battle with each other, both of them moon religions. So this is a verse that's related to this death of Sophia. The stars once spoke to man. world destiny that they are silent now. To be aware of this silence become pain for earthly man. But in the deepening silence, there grows and ripens what man speaks to the stars. To be aware of this speaking can become strength for spirit man. So this connection to the Sophia, who was embodied in the Maria Sophia, is a very important step towards Manas. Manas is the next stage of evolution. It's what we have to strive for to participate in the new Jerusalem and its building. It will show its first signs in the sixth age of Philadelphia, of brotherhood. So you have in this image a beautiful painting depicting the mystery of Golgotha. And then you have from the cross the words, "Woman, behold your son." And to this disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. That means he took this Sophia Maria being into his inner life. They lived together in Ephesus. They then, you could say, helped to create the Sophian gospel, which was offered by John. And this John, Lazarus John, as we know, was a very special being that Steiner touched on in his last address. John the Baptist was of the priestly stream. He had a special relationship of grace from the heavenly Sophian realm, whereas Hiram Abiff, who was the hero of the temple legend, became Lazarus John. He's the one in the temple legend who descends to the center of the earth and there gets the golden hammer with which to finish the brazen sea that the evil apprentices tried to prevent. So we have, through the union of these two, a kind of marriage of heaven and earth and the beginning of a new preparation for the sixth age. To begin with, Christianity is bound up with the purely materialistic culture of the fourth and fifth epochs. And the true Christianity of the future, which possesses the secret of the molten sea and the golden triangle, only exists secretly. This Christianity has another symbol, no longer that of the crucified Son of God, but the cross encircled by roses. This will become the symbol of the new Christianity of the sixth post-Atlantean epoch. Out of the mystery of the brotherhood of the rose cross will arise the Christianity of the sixth cultural epoch, which will recognize the significance of the molten sea and the golden triangle. The molten sea is what is created when the appropriate amounts of water and molten metal are cast. The three apprentices do it wrongly, and the casting is destroyed. But Hiram, when the mysteries of fire are revealed to him by Tubal-Cain, he is thereby enabled to unite water and fire in the proper way. This brings the molten sea into being. This is what the secret of the Rosicrucians is. It is brought about when the water of calm wisdom is united with the fire of the astral world, with the fire of the passion and desire. A union must be brought about, which is of bronze. That is to say, is lasting and durable. It must endure into the next epoch when the secret of the golden, sacred golden triangle is added to it, the secret of Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. This triangle, which it entails, will form the content of the renewed Christianity of the sixth cultural epoch that is being prepared by Rosicrucians. And then what is symbolized by the molten sea will be united with the knowledge of reincarnation and karma. That is the new occult teaching, which will be united again with Christianity. The higher self of man, composed of Atman, Buddhi, and Manas, will become an open secret when the man of the sixth epoch has become ripe enough to receive it. Christian Rosenkreuz will then no longer be required to give warning, but everything which signifies strife on the outer plane will be resolved in peace through the molten sea and the sacred golden triangle. So the molten sea, behind it are the planetary forces that related to the 7 root races. When those are overcome and raised to a higher level, these planetary forces, which are related to the 7 metals, then are harmonized, and they then become the basis of a new community where people from these different races will come together in brotherhood and harmonize their forces in a new community. And this is a curtain that was made for the Goetheanum. You can see the Rosicrucian cross there where the Goetheanum is up on a hill. You could say that the little river and the division between this moon world and the sun world has to do with the Goethe's fairy tale, which Steiner spoke of as being important. And here you have an image taken from one of Steiner's esoteric lectures. I've put this picture of the 2 Johns in the middle of it. But it shows that there is a summer path and a winter path. Summer path is the Abel path. The winter path is the Cain path. The 6th age will arise out of a union of Cain and Abel, of a union of these 2. And you could say the Christian community, the priestly and the shepherds are one and the same. And the shepherds and kings are initiate kings, you could say, who relate to this Cain stream. So the fact that Steiner helped the Christian community priests was a gesture of love that is a preparation for this 6th age. But he made a point that anthroposophy isn't a religion, it's a science. So he was helping them as a private person in developing their ritual, etc. So we have from theosophy to anthroposophy. This is taken from a book by Sergei Prokofiev, the late Sergei Prokofiev, who you could say comes out of this Russian folk spirit or soul that is very much has to play an important role in the future. There are forces working against that Russian Slavic development, especially from the Anglo-American secret brotherhoods that Steiner spoke of on various occasions. They help to bring this powerful force of the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, where someone like Stalin took over after Lenin and Trotsky and others. So this shows that the Sophia, unlike human being who have a 7-year rhythm, she has a 700-year rhythm that nevertheless follows a similar path. So she's been evolving from touching down on the physical plane at around 2100 BC. That's where Abraham mission began. And then later in the 4th age, she then gives birth to this Sophia, that the Greek wisdom that looked up to Sophia played a role. And now in our time, it's Anthroposophia, and she goes ahead of us to spirit self. She is the inspirer of spirit self. That's why you find in the Russian Slavic people a very strong orientation to the Sophia being in many of their iconography and many of the representatives like Soloviev, Bulgakov, and others. So this is just a depiction my wife and I worked on the left there, a woodcut that we shared as a Christmas card. It's meant to show how those 12 stars can be the handle of a lamp, and then overcoming the lower moon forces can become the vessel of the lamp. And the sun forces shining from our heart are like the grail that shines in that vessel. So gold is shining in the silver vessel of the moon, and the trumpets are sounding, and the dragon is overcome. So in the mini apocalypse of Matthew, which is also devoted to the kingly stream, you have this lamp that's spoken of, those wise virgins who have oil in their lamps, and the foolish virgins that don't have oil in their lamp. This refers to the difference between initiates who take up the macrocosmic Christ principle and many of the sort of Eastern methods that continue into the period of Christianity without embracing the Christ. So they transcend the physical, attain higher forms of consciousness, but by bypassing the Christ event, they're missing the most important event in earthly evolution. So they lack oil in their lamps. So here you have some meditation that Steiner gave regarding the Lord's Prayer, where the cube down below, or the square, is related to the four bodies, earth, air, or the physical, etheric, astral, and ego. And then above you have manas, buddhi, atman, or spirit self, life spirit, spirit man. And those are the higher aspects of our nature. On the left, you've got the reverse macrocosmic Lord's Prayer that Steiner gave for the first time when he laid the foundation stone for the first Goetheanum, which was meant to be a kind of Grail temple that prefigures this brotherhood impulse of the sixth age, and a new understanding of the mystery of evil that's very much needed was meant to be at the center of that building that was destroyed by fire. And this ego, as Steiner points out, to begin with, is an organ that through individual meditations and exercises and focusing on the brow, the forehead, one can activate the two-petal lotus flower. But it isn't enough, he says, that the organ of the ego is developed in man so that the higher self can stream into him to make him into a higher being. We find the organ for this where a vertical line from the top of the head crosses a horizontal line through the root of the nose, or a little above it. This organ is the pineal gland. Man makes a connection with the divine self in the world through the pineal gland. So the etherization of the blood as a lecture standing on its own can help to illuminate this. But that's the development of spirit self. The pineal gland is at the center of the human head. It's the metamorphosed heart of our past incarnation. It can shine like an inner sun and create an aura around the human head, a golden sun aura that embodies heart thinking, sun thinking, Christ thinking, Michaelic thinking, Sophian thinking. So this is sort of our future that we're called to. In order to develop this clairvoyance, Steiner makes it clear it's something very ordinary. If a pearl is lying in the roadway and a chicken finds it, the chicken does not value the pearl. Most men and women today are chickens in this respect. They do not value the pearl that lies there in full view before them. What they value is something quite different. They value their concepts and ideas, but no one could think abstractly could have thoughts and ideas if he were not clairvoyant. In our ordinary thinking, the pearl of clairvoyance is contained from the start. Ideas arise in the soul through exactly the same process as what gives rise to its highest powers. It is immensely important to learn to understand that clairvoyance begins in something common and everyday. We only have to recognize the supersensible nature of our concepts and ideas. We must realize that these come to us from the supersensible world. Only then can we look at the matter rightly. In the 18th century, what was considered a great word was uttered by a pioneer of thinking. "O man, make bold to use the power of reason." Today, a great word must resound in men's soul. "O man, make bold to claim the concepts and ideas as the beginning of thy clairvoyance." What I have just expressed, I said many years ago publicly in my book, Truth and Science and the Philosophy of Freedom, where I showed that human ideas come from supersensible spiritual knowledge. It was not understood at the time, and no wonder, for those who should have understood it were, well, like the chicken. So we need to develop this heart thinking. And anthroposophy is not mere thinking like any other. The ideas that anthroposophy presents and the words it uses are not meant as abstract theory. Anthroposophical ideas are not shaped in the way other kinds of learning make him shape his ideas. For the past several centuries, words are not used the same way as they are elsewhere. Anthroposophical ideas are vessels to fashion by love, that are fashioned by love. And we are surrounded by the spiritual world to partake of their content. Anthroposophy must bring the light of true humanness to shine out in thoughts that bear love's imprint. Knowledge is only the form in which we reflect our hearts, receiving the light of the world spirit that has come to dwell in our heart. And from there, heart illumined human thought. Since anthroposophy cannot really be grasped except by the power of love, it is love engendering when human beings take it in a way true to its own nature. Words expressing anthroposophical truths are not like words spoken elsewhere today. Rightly conceived, they are all really reverential pleas that the Spirit make itself known to us. And here he basically says that for our knowledge of higher worlds comes through higher spirits, spirits of the higher hierarchies, knowing in us. The important thing for us is to keep in mind at this stage of evolution, the human constitution is such that we can know only about those worlds that are accessible to our organs of perception. If we want to transcend this limitation, we must open ourselves up to the consciousness of spiritual beings above us, so that what these beings experience becomes the content of our own consciousness. So this is an old kind of biblical verse. The kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchant man seeking godly pearls, who when he has found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So the pearl plays an important role in the New Jerusalem. by thinking, raising our thinking, this pearl that Steiner just spoke about in that earlier expose, he shows how it can give rise to a 12-fold philosophical vantage point, and that these complement each other. You could form a cross here. At the top, you have spiritism, where Lucifer is more at home. Down below, you have materialism, where Ahriman is more at home. Then you have realism and idealism that need to be married in the middle, that then bring balance, like the Christ in the middle there of this sculptural group that is able to counterbalance these. And this is how we fashion the pearls that lead into the 12 gates of the New Jerusalem, realizing that we can participate in this higher thinking. And this pearl, which has to do with our thinking, is also cosmically related to the Grail moon. And the Grail moon is the Easter moon. You know that Easter is the calendar date is chosen by the first full moon after the spring equinox. And then there's the first Sunday after that. So Sunday, the full moon, that means the moon was full, the Easter moon, where the Christ descended through the mystery of Golgotha into the earth. At that mystery of Golgotha, gave the earth the new sun power. And that was like pouring his being into the Grail vessel. And that was not only the Jesus being, but the entire earth. And an expression of that was also there in the Maria Sophia being, who beneath the cross held the body of Jesus in this Pietà that Michelangelo created that beautiful sculpture of. This is Claude de Herbois' painting. And he says then, let us place before ourselves the mother thought of as a virgin with Christ on her lap. And let us then make the statement, he who can have feelings of holiness before this image, he feels himself to be standing before the Grail, the holy chalice, the moon mother, now touched by Christ, the new Eve, bearer of Christ, the Sun Spirit, outshines all other lights, all other gods. And here I'm showing how through sacred geometry, which the John was familiar with, it was part of the esoteric initiatory teaching that goes back to Babylonian and Egyptian times. And the Greeks very much worked with it as well, like Euclid. These were esoteric concepts before they became exoteric. So on the right, you have what's called the squaring of the circle. That square, which encompasses the size of the earth, is related to a circle that encompasses it and goes through the center of the diameter of the moon. And that circle has the same circumference measurement as that square. And that triangle, which touches the edges of the square, touches the center of that moon. And so this is part of sacred geometry, the squaring of the circle. And I believe this played a role in the mapping out of the New Jerusalem, the Golden City. There's 3 crosses, which together make 12. And Easter at the mystery of Golgotha, the sun was in the age of Aries, the sign of the ram. And so all of those Easters for 2,160 years were under the sign of the ram. But since 1413, And cosmically, actually before that, we entered the sign of the fishes. And that is where Easter now, the sun is in the constellation of the fishes. The fishes are related to the feet. So this is when we really touch down on the earth. We hear of the Fisher King in the Grail. You have the two fishes as that symbol as well. But in the future, the sixth age, it's the Aquarian age. And that will then be the time where we celebrate this new age of brotherhood. And this is being prepared through Rosicrucianism, as was pointed out earlier. And the Manichaeans, who were forerunners of this, you see at the bottom left a medallion with this cross with the 12 pearls. And these are related to the zodiac. They're related to the 12 stars around the head of the Virgin. And so I would say there are actually 12 Easters. We're only have gone through 2. The sixth age will have gone through 3, and all 3 crosses will be addressed. But it'll take a 12 times 2100 years to go through all 12 Easters. So you need to create a spatial image of the entire Platonic year to understand what the New Jerusalem depicts. That's the way the gods see it, as a panorama of time. They don't see time the way we do. So here I've shown these 3 crosses. You can put them over top of each other, and then you'll have just a single cross, but they'll have then 3 gates at each quadrant: north, south, east, west. And those are depicted in the image of the Golden City, which is a cube. And it has the symbolic reference to the 3-dimensional world, the realm of the Father God. But the Sun God entering it allows us to overcome the death that we had to experience within that 3-dimensional world through the loss of paradise. And by turning the earth into a sun, then that cube becomes a radiant golden sun cube. The salt crystal, the alchemist spoke of the celestial salt, the heavenly salt that shines. So this is higher thinking. Salt was related to thinking, mercury to feeling, sulfur to the will in the alchemical trinity that Rudolf Steiner interpreted for us. So the cube is hidden in the Holy of Holies of Solomon's temple. That's why in the 11th chapter, John was told to measure the temple, leave out the outer court, which is the physical and etheric body. We will in the future, as we advance to the 6th age, have to leave the physical body behind. That's referred to as the first death, which is really actually the last incarnational death, which began in Lemuria. And those who have taken up the Christ impulse will able to enter the astral world, like you can dissolve salt into water. But those who haven't taken up the Christ impulse will be cast out at that first death. And later there's a second death, which includes leaving the etheric behind and having the astral as the lowest member. And that's the transition at the end of Earth that the 7th trumpet represents, where human beings enter the New Jerusalem and another part of humanity is cast out into a kind of moon sphere that will circle around that new sun sphere of the future Jupiter. So that the fact that Steiner says that trumpet is sounding now, and this division that I spoke of at the very beginning of this presentation of the human beings after crossing the threshold in the 1840s, there's a downward and an upward, and that we take our angel with us. This is related to this theme. So let me now get to a conclusion. For human beings, love is the most important fruit of experience in the sense world. Once we understand the nature of love or compassion, we will find that love is the way spirit expresses its truth in the world of the senses. We may even say that in love, the spiritual world awakens in the physical. The more truly a soul inhabits the spiritual world, the more it experiences lovelessness and lack of compassion as the denial of the spirit itself. And this is then this picture of how the physical foundation and our willing was laid on the old Saturn, our feeling life and the etheric on old Sun, our thinking and astral body as a gift given to us on the old Moon, and on the Earth, it's the ego. Now we have to develop spirit self, manas, which involves this fashioning of the future planet of love. And you can see in the middle there, the divine Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. What is the quality, Steiner asks, that epitomizes the divinity, the threefold divinity? The divinity has shared power with Ahriman, wisdom with Lucifer, but it's kept the most important attribute to itself, which is infinite love. That's what came to expression in the mystery of Golgotha. That's what has led the path back upward again. And when we take it up, as we cross the threshold through a meditation like these seals, or through the foundation stone meditation, which helps us to bring about a balancing of thinking, feeling, and willing. Steiner expressed the fact that love arises out of an absolute perfect equilibrium between thinking, feeling, and willing. And the foundation stone meditation is a path towards that. And you can see the symbol of the Grail, where these two triangles, the human and the divine, the microcosm, the macrocosm, come together. And how do we get there? By taking in wisdom. Beginning with the earth phase of evolution, the wisdom of the outer cosmos become an inner wisdom in the human being. Internalized in this way, it becomes the seed of love. Wisdom is a prerequisite for love. Love is the result of wisdom that has been reborn in the I. So thank you very much for your patience.
Dear Florian, thank you so much for your very intense and meaningful presentation. So now, dear friends, if you have a question or statement, so please do so. Do you know how to raise your hands, electronic hands? So just navigate your cursor or arrow in the bottom of your screen. And it's downloaded new program. Now I do not understand it. Oh, reactions. This is a little hard with reactions. So, and you can press and raise your hand. And so this is how we're going to proceed. Will we first? You know, dear friends, we are approaching 12 Holy Nights, and this is last week of Advent. And according to spiritual science, angelic beings are leaving us. So now we are becoming alone. So have your initiative and ask a question. Okay, this is question from Rose. Okay.
So my question, it goes, I put it in the chat earlier when I had during the part of your presentation, Florian, which thank you. I so appreciate what you're doing here. And the question, you mentioned something about thoughts. And I guess I wanted to bring in the idea that, the question, the statement that Michael wants the thought, right? It's the thought. And so I'd like to introduce that as a question in terms of, in context of your presentation and how you think about that. Thank you.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so thinking is, if you look at the kingdoms of nature, the mineral, the plant, the animal, the human, our most mature faculty is thinking. And there are organs within our organism that are in a earlier stage of development and organs that are in have reached a zenith and that will decline. And among those that will decline are our generative organs, because we're being called in the future to a new form of procreation that will be required in the sixth age. Thinking has reached its zenith and on the physical plane. So now it needs to be wedded to the heart. So you could imagine a lemniscate between head and heart, which can be expressed as heart thinking. So this heart thinking lemniscate crosses over in the larynx. So that's where conversation, where two or three are gathered, can raise thoughts to a higher level. It's not just our independent thinking, it's learning to think in a way that is engendered by a love for the world around us. So this Michael, you have the picture that Steiner gave, was the cosmic ruler of thought. So what we see outwardly as light, the light of the sun, the light of the stars, that's all a manifestation of cosmic intelligence radiating through the cosmic world. The inner counterpart to that is inner light, that we have a conscious and an unconscious part of our nature. When we begin to cross the threshold, the world on the other side, which includes the abyss down below, where in the first class lessons, for example, they talk about the three beasts lurking down there in the dark abyss, related to our thinking, feeling, and willing that wants to sort of drag it down to create caricatures of it. In order to cross that threshold, which we've all begun to cross since the 1840s, we see how the dragon, after not being able to successfully devour the child, goes after the woman and sends out a flood after the dragon, or sends out a flood after the woman. The woman is given two wings of an eagle to fly to a higher place that's safe from the dragon. What are these wings of the eagle? On the one hand, they represent higher thinking that can spiritualize our thinking. That's why John had the symbol of this eagle, and also the two-petal lotus flower on the forehead, which represent our thinking capacity. There was a new organ implanted in the brain during the age of Gabriel that set the stage for this higher kind of thinking that we can develop now, that Rudolf Steiner embodied in his philosophy of freedom. So this living thinking, this moral and ethical individual identity arises through intuitive thinking that is related to imagination, inspiration. These are sort of three levels Steiner talks about. And that is, if we are in the physical world, we're seeing the sense world, and most of our thoughts arise from the sense world. But if we begin to meditate and work inwardly with mantrams and images like these 7 Rosicrucian seals, then we're beginning to unfold our wings. And the anthroposophical method starts from the upper chakras working down. That starts with the 2-petal lotus, then the 16-petal throat chakra, and then the heart, the 12-petal lotus. And each time we have to activate 1/2 of those petals because we have the other half atavistically. So there's an 8-fold path for the throat chakra that the Buddha already worked with. And there's a 6-fold path that Steiner made a very important part of his schooling for developing the 6 petals of the 12-petaled heart chakra. Once those petals are illuminated, they start to shine. And then when one is able to impress what at first is an astral experience of the chakras is impressed into the etheric, they also start to spin and turn. Then one can begin to see the world around. And this is where this higher thinking is tremendously important. If you enter those realms without clear thinking, you can easily get led astray. You can easily mistake what you see. Because, for example, everything is reversed in the astral world. And so what's coming towards you is really coming out of you and vice versa. So without clear thinking and understanding how to navigate in this world and having the help of something like the Foundation Stone meditation, it's like a ship without a compass. And without a clear compass, without being able to map your course, you can't hold a strong hand on the rudder to steer your ship in a time that's going to become ever more apocalyptic, ever more cosmic storms are going to break in because we're dealing with the mystery of evil and human beings aren't going about it in the right way. They're embracing it in mass in terms of humanity at large. So anthroposophists, people on a spiritual path, need to develop these wings of the ego to raise their thinking to beyond that boundary of the upper boundary of nature into supernature and begin to become at home in that realm and bring that wisdom back down so we can weave it into our everyday life. And that way we can be in the world, but not always of it. And we can co-create the New Jerusalem by gaining deeper knowledge into these mysteries that I've been trying to share.
That's a wonderful explanation. Thank you. So I feel like it very much clarifies the question. I wish that I had remembered when we went back to, because I put it into the chat right about the time when we were talking about. So I think you've clarified that we're talking about materialistic thoughts versus the spiritual thoughts that that those of us that are working through the 6 basic exercises are working to clarify our thinking. And then somehow this information is brought to individuals who are not on the path in such a way that they can embrace it without, even if they've had like trauma around religion in the past, or I think there's a lot we can do to clarify this information for beginners, I guess is what I'm putting that out there as a thought. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. So who will be next? Okay, Adam. Yes, hi, thank you. Adam, unmute your machine, please. Adam, unmute your machine.
Yeah, I always forget that. Florian, at the beginning of your talk, you mentioned the threshold. And it seems to me that anthroposophy is quite unique in that sense that it has the concept of the threshold. But I was wondering if you've come across this in any other spiritual traditions or religions.
I think it definitely does. It's just often described from a different perspective. And if you look at, Buddhism, it was a period before the Christ had made the earth sacred. So the physical world was seen as Maya and illusion. Physical incarnation was seen as entering that realm of mortality and death. And so much of the path there has to do with transcending the world of suffering down below in order to achieve enlightenment on this upper realm of the spirit. So one often started with the lower chakras, the root chakra, and that's the unconscious pole of our being. So we needed a guru if we're working from that level. So we were pretty much dependent for those who are on that path on a teacher helping us to think for us while we were still in that vulnerable position. But there was temptations along the way of going on that path of transcendence. And often the methods used then were austerity, where you kind of deadened your senses and withdrew in a cave to try to, but you were dealing with the temptations of the physical world. That's why a lot of the Hindu temples, for example, around the outside of them, they have all kind of sculptures with demonic beings and acts that are kind of expressive of the temptations on the path. So that's seeing the temple from outside. And the leaving the world of samsara, the world of the rebirth behind, had more to do with the transcendence of the physical. But then you have this impulse of the bodhisattvas who come. Steiner speaks of there being 6 pre-Christian bodhisattvas and 6 post-Christian bodhisattvas. So the first post-Christian bodhisattva is the Maitreya Buddha. Gautama is the last of the pre-Christian. And each of these, according to him, in between their incarnations, ascend into the Buddhi realm where they surround the Christ being as 12 around the 13th. And there's human vehicles, you could say, for this bodhisattva, and the beings who incorporate in them, usually around the 30th year. They incarnate every 100 years or so for 5,000 years. And then at the end, this archangel fully incorporates in them, and that's when they fulfill their mission, in this case, under the Bodhi tree for Buddha. But he brought the gift of compassion to humanity as a pre-Christian virtue that leads up to Christ. So there's a relationship there. If you listen to Rudolf Steiner's understanding that the being of Krishna was a manifestation of what later came as the Nathan Jesus being who never participated in the fall. Then you have in Hinduism also what a preparation for Christianity. And there you have a whole range of gods and demigods and battles that are also part of their picture. But, you know, it differs from Christianity. It's earlier in the Kali Yuga than Christianity, where this mystery of evil grows ever more powerful. But I think any of these religions, they all have an esoteric and an exoteric. So Frischoff Schuon wrote a book. He's one of these classical writers in the tradition of comparative religion. And he draws a kind of a chart where he has a line, and then he has all the world religions above that line, streaming down below the line. And that's the line that separates the exoteric from the esoteric. And his theme is the essential unity of all the world religions. So he tries to show that they have a little bit of a different approach to from that of anthroposophy. They, for example, generally, there's many other thinkers that are part of this, like René Guénon is another thinker in that stream. And they had journals, they've got a lot of publications, but they don't accept modern science like Steiner does. They feel it's a betrayal of thinking. It's a thinking gone astray. Steiner says that modern scientific worldview was necessary. He differentiates between Lucifer and Ahriman, which is a new way of seeing. Even among Christians, you never had this threefold understanding of good and evil. You always had generally just the dualistic one. So even Goethe was subject to that in his Faust, where he brought certain esoteric mysteries to the foreground. So there's probably others who have more to share on this, but for now, that's what I could. Anytime you cross the threshold, you have to meet your lower self. You have to deal with your lower self, which is called the lower guardian. And one more thing with Jungian psychology, for example, Jung studied very deeply the alchemical tradition. He's written whole books dealing with that, and the Gnostic tradition, which embodies vestiges of spiritual traditions. And he then speaks of the shadow, and he speaks of the personality as a mask that's conditioned by the outer. He calls it the persona. But he says, if you want to get to the self, the genuine, deeper self, you have to first own the shadow, which is hidden in the unconscious. And behind that shadow is your contrasexual opposite. For a man, it's the anima. For a woman, it's the animus. Only when you embrace that contrasexual opposite, which is hidden in the unconscious, do you arrive at the true self. And he connects that with the Christ being, which various alchemists did. So you see the shadow. He says you have to own the double and you have to transform the double. So that's kind of somebody coming out of psychology, depth psychology. Eric Neumann is one of the students of his who takes that up as well. So that's another expression of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Adam, are you complete?
I'm okay, yes, thank you. It just strikes me that anthroposophy has some another contribution to make that you alluded to, Florian, in terms of the Lucifer and the Aramanic, which I haven't come across that in any other sort of system of thought.
Yeah, so in Steiner's view, you could take like a person, and you could place that sculptural group next to him. And obviously that imagination was the central focal imagination that Rudolf Steiner was contributing as a new gift out of his esoteric work. And that's why in the little cupola of the Goetheanum, you have that same theme as an imagination up there in the middle, with Lucifer above, Ahriman below. And that was the one imagination he chose to bring down in this sculptural group, which is the only thing that survived the fire, which in itself is a kind of a destiny event. And no sooner was the building ready to be opened and the mystery of evil comes in and destroys the building. He says these backward Cain and Abel, which have been talking about, certain Jesuits and Freemasons made a pact against the middle, which led to the fire that destroyed the Goetheanum. And so there's this middle stream that has to do with the Johannine being himself. The gospel was written, the fourth gospel, which Steiner says is the most esoteric gospel. And that same author wrote the book of Revelation. So it's hidden in the book of Revelation. Various authors like Emil Bach shows that it's there in the Old Testament. In his book, Interpreting the Apocalypse According to the Christian Community, he shows that it was very much there in these two demons that you see in Greek wisdom as well, where Ulysses, you have the voyage between Charybdis and the other
Scylla.
demon.
Yeah.
So he does a pretty good job in his book on the apocalypse, which interestingly enough, he had presented it in a lecture form, but it was already written down. And that was right when the Nazis came into power and they confiscated their libraries, their books. That manuscript was confiscated, destroyed. So it had to be reconfigured, redone in order to publish it. So, and he was put in prison for a time, as well as some of the other priests. So it's worth reading someone like his contribution towards this theme.
Okay, thank you very much. So, dear friends, we are working already 2.5 hours. And I know one more question in the chat box from Geoffrey. So, how do you feel, Florian?
I'm
Shall
fine.
we?
Sure.
You're good. So, dear friends, please feel free to leave. I know it's probably after 9 p.m. in London. Yeah, hi. So, Geoffrey, could you? Yes, hi, thank you. Can you just read it for us? Or
Yes, hello. There was some mention of the traditional understanding of Revelation and the apocalypse story in the Bible. And a lot of what you and others in anthroposophy teach about the history of man isn't really obvious from the teachings of other Bible scholars or religious leaders who try to explain that book to their congregation and to other people around the world. And I was just wondering if you think that John, when he wrote the book of Revelation, had a solid foundation in all of the understanding that you just explained and that Rudolf Steiner has taught, or was he just recording visions that he was having with the idea that later men would come to understand and put all the pieces together and come to understand what they meant in the similar, in the way that you've been teaching it.
Rudolf Steiner mentions that the apocalyptic theme was very much a part of the esoteric mystery streams that were still extant in the time that John lived. And reincarnation and karma is related to this, in as much as Steiner reveals in esoteric circles that this individuality who incarnated as Lazarus John, who's kind of hidden within the Gospel of John. There's 7 miracles. The 7th miracle is the raising of Lazarus. That's a secret relating to his own initiation of being raised from the dead by the Christ being. And that Steiner indicates that this individuality had been Hiram Abiff, and a past incarnation who was there at the time as the master builder of Solomon's temple. And he was had come out of a spiritual tradition in Phoenicia, where the mysteries that had to do with the phoenix, a pre-Christian resurrection mystery, which has to do with the Nathan Jesus being, according to Steiner, were celebrated, and that this being was the one who awoke the neophyte in the initiation chamber, which was often a tomb-like chamber, like in the Egyptian mysteries, where the Giza pyramid empty tomb was there. This was where the 3.5 day initiation took place, and they understood, according to these solar mysteries, that this Nathan Jesus being was the one who was symbolized by the phoenix that rises out of the ashes, that then awakened the neophyte to become an initiate. And this was brought from Phoenicia to Jerusalem by 2 parties. One is the Queen of Sheba, where there's another version of it, and the other was through this Hiram. And Solomon, of course, himself was celebrated as a source of wisdom, but he represents the Abel stream, having now reached this level of power and kingship. But he represents the old moon heritage, where Abel, in the form of Hiram, represents the emerging future. That's why the Queen of Sheba, who represents the human embodiment of the world soul, initially comes after hearing the wisdom of Solomon to marry him. But after she meets Hiram, she takes her ring back while he's intoxicated, and then bridges relationship to Hiram. So this is very much a part of the temple legend that the Freemasons worked with. So that's sort of an undercurrent to Western tradition. These are the secret brotherhoods that, according to Steiner, go back to Christian Rosenkreuz, because this same individuality who was Hiram Abiff, who incarnated as Hiram, reappears as Lazarus John, who unites with John the Baptist, who had been beheaded at the raising of Lazarus, and that they then separate after that into 2 incarnation streams. And this Lazarus John becomes Christian Rosenkreuz, who has like 3 subsequent initiations, starting in the 13th century, around 1250. And these this is part of a Western esoteric Christian stream. Now, I'm familiar with the usual interpretation of the Book of Revelation. I've got part of a library that's related to that. I haven't been bringing that forward. Many of them take seriously what is in the very first part of the exposition of the Apocalypse of John. It's translated as He's going to share the vision of what will shortly come to pass. Steiner says that's a mistranslation, a misreading, that it should read that he's creating a sketch, a short sketch of what will come in the future. So because of that misunderstanding, that's a stumbling block right at the beginning of the book. Many people who even had access to Kabbalistic relation between letters and numbers saw that 666 related to Nero. They saw that history after Christ embodying this, and many of them now see in our present time the events going on in Jerusalem, the site of the temple. These battles that are going on right now are stirring up a lot of this apocalyptic kind of frenzy among both people who are still Zionist Jews, who are still waiting for the Messiah, and those Western Anglo-American, American Christians who see a marriage between the Old Testament and the New Testament and interpret these books in ways that is colored by materialism and viewed from the anthroposophical perspective. They want to bring it down to the physical plane and try to interpret with historical events. Like a lot of this literature in the US happened after the San Francisco earthquake. More of it came out after the first atomic bomb, which is in fact an apocalyptic event. But without esoteric knowledge, without this higher dimension, that esoteric training and crossing the threshold and learning the language of symbols that was worked with in the mystery schools, you can't really penetrate to the secrets. So I believe it's true that John was an initiate. He was familiar with old ancient wisdom that came down to him through the Greeks, for example. That's why the Logos mysteries were expressed in the beginning was the Word. And his mystery of numbers with number 7 and 12. This is all part of the language of the qualitative reading of numbers. His symbol of the two-horned beast is actually a symbol with two horns that was used in Western esoteric Christianity, as well as the seven-horned symbol with the seven-pointed star for the lamb. So a lot of these symbols can only be really understood with the help of esoteric knowledge, which was forced underground already in the 3rd century when Christianity became a state religion, and the esoteric was driven underground. It rose somewhat through the Grail legends and their symbolism, which is very much a continuation of this theme. And so living into that symbolic language, I think, is something that a lot of the exegesis that is practiced by theologians within the various denominations who try to tackle the book of Revelation fall short.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so shall we conclude our long meeting? Dear Florian, thank you so much. And dear friends, this is not end, because you can come on January 4th to ask more questions. So because Florian graciously said yes, and he will do presentation on Isis Sophia, Maria and Isis Sophia on January 4th, which is part of our 12 Holy Nights. So, and again, we're starting on 26th of December with Sonia Setzer, who is a former General Secretary of Anthroposophical Society in Brazil. So, and she will give a presentation of 12 Holy Nights according to Sergei Parkofiev's research, 12 Holy Nights and constellations of stars. So, but now, dear Florian, thank you so much. Dear friends, please feel free to unmute your machine and say a big thank you to Florian.
Thank you, Florian.
Thank you all for your patience. And I know some people have had some questions that emailed me, and I'm sorry I haven't gotten to them yet, but I will do what I can to respond to those as well.
Thank you so much, Florian. That was amazing.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you for
Thank-
coming, dear friends.
So,
Thank you so much. Amazing. Amazing.
Blessings for the Holy Nights
Thank
to
you.
all of you.
Good night.
Thank you.